Chapter 27. The Surprise for the Drakzarians. The aftermath of the battle on Eridani V left the conscripts feeling grateful the battle had ended, with them being the victors unaware of the true underlying factors of events. The 8 Space Lords, a newfound alliance of ancient and modern warriors, stood together aboard the transport ship, their eyes reflecting a shared mission. They were ready to switch to their new weapons, the quantum disruptors, at the first sign of Drakzarian suspicion. As the transport glided through the vastness of space towards their ship, a tense silence enveloped the group. They knew that upon docking, they would be subjected to the usual decontamination process, a procedure they were now aware was a guise for the Drakzarians to harvest chemicals from their bodies, a remnant of their conscript status. Rook, standing tall among his fellow Space Lords, issued a quiet order as the transport docked with their ship. "Everyone, through decontamination as usual, stay together, and we go last. Remember, today we have a surprise for them." The group moved through the ship's corridors, their footsteps echoing in the metallic halls. As they approached the decontamination chamber, a sense of unease filled the area. The Space Lords exchanged glances, each aware of the plan they were about to enact. One by one, they entered the decontamination chamber. The process was routine, a procedure they had undergone countless times. But this time, it was different. Each Space Lord carried within them the pill from the Sirens, an enhancement that would not only protect them from the Drakzarians' harvesting, but also give them an edge. Nakia, stepping into the chamber, felt a surge of adrenaline. She knew that the Drakzarians would not be expecting what was about to happen. As the chamber's doors closed, she braced herself. Inside the chamber, the usual process began, but the Space Lords remained unaffected. The chemicals the Drakzarians sought to extract remained within them, safeguarded by the Siren's enhancement. It was a small victory, but a significant one, a sign of their newfound autonomy and strength. As each Space Lord exited the chamber, they shared a look of triumph, a silent acknowledgement of their successful subversion of the Drakzarians' plans. Lysander, emerging from the chamber with a grin, whispered to Rook, "That should confuse them off for a while." Once all the Space Lords had completed the process, they regrouped, ready to switch to their quantum disruptors at a moment's notice. They were no longer mere pawns in the Drakzarians' game. They were players in their own right, with the power to challenge and perhaps even defeat their oppressors. Rook, looking at his fellow Space Lords, felt a sense of pride and unity. "We've taken the first step towards our freedom," he said, his voice firm. "We must stay vigilant and be ready for whatever comes next." The aftermath of the decontamination process brought an unexpected turn of events aboard the ship. General Kragar, the formidable Drakzarian leader, had been monitoring the process closely. When it became evident that the procedure had failed to extract the vials from Rook and the other 7 conscripts, his voice boomed through the ship's communication system, calling them out to return for decontamination. Rook, prepared for this moment, knew that their time had come. With a resolute voice that echoed the determination in his heart, he gave the order, "Our time has come." The words were not just a signal. They were a declaration of their newfound strength and autonomy. In response to Rook's command, a remarkable transformation occurred. The armor of each Space Lord quivered and shifted, its appearance changing to a shade blacker than the void of space itself. And upon their chests appeared an emblem, a symbol of their unity and purpose, the emblem of the Space Lords. The emblem was a majestic phoenix, soaring triumphantly, embodying rebirth and an indomitable spirit. Its wings were a striking fusion of past and future, the right wing sleek and streamlined, representing the advanced technology of the modern era, while the left wing was adorned with classic feathers, a tribute to the ancient warrior's valor. At the heart of the emblem, set against a celestial orb, was a cross of a traditional sword and a futuristic blaster. This symbolized the unity of different epochs, the ancient and the modern, in their shared quest for freedom and justice. The colors of the emblem were a palette of deep space blue, starlight silver, and fiery gold, capturing the essence of their cosmic journey, the depth of their resolve, and the flame of their courage. This logo, now emblazoned on their chests, stood as a beacon of the Space Lords' newfound identity. It was a testament to their diverse origins and their united purpose. They were no longer disparate warriors from different times. They were Space Lords, united in their quest to challenge the Drakzarians and change the course of their destiny. General Kragar, observing from the command center, felt a chill of foreboding. The figures he once saw as mere pawns had become something he had not witnessed during his long life. In the dimly lit corridors of the ship, the Space Lords assembled, their emblems a stark contrast against the metallic walls. With an aura of power that radiated from them, a tangible sign of their evolution from conscripts to leaders in their own right. Rook, standing at the forefront, felt a surge of responsibility. "This ship was once a symbol of our oppression," he declared to his fellow Space Lords, his voice echoing through the corridor. "But now, it's the birthplace of our rebellion. We're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for all those who have been subjugated by the Drakzarians." Nakia, standing beside Rook, nodded in agreement. "We are the harbingers of change. Our emblem, the Phoenix, isn't just a symbol. It's a promise of rebirth, of rising from the ashes of our past to forge a new future." Lysander, his usual boisterous self now tempered with a sense of gravitas, added, "Let the Drakzarians see this emblem, and no fear. The Space Lords are here, and we will not be silenced or subdued." As they prepared to confront General Kragar, the Space Lords checked their weapons, now enhanced with the technology from the Sirens of Tenebris. They were no longer reliant on the Drakzarians for their armaments. They were armed with weapons that symbolized their freedom and strength. The internal communication system inside the decontamination area crackled to life, and General Kragar's voice boomed through the speakers. "Conscripts, return to your quarters. This defiance will not be tolerated." Rook stepped forward, activating his communicator. "General Kragar, we are no longer your conscripts. We are the Space Lords, and we demand to be heard. We will not return to our quarters. We will not bow to your demands." A tense silence followed Rook's declaration, those within He-Room seemingly holding its breath. The Space Lords stood firm, united in their resolve. General Kragar, realizing the magnitude of the challenge he now faced, made his decision. "Very well, conscripts. If it is a confrontation you seek, you shall have it. Prepare yourselves." The Space Lords, undaunted by the threat, readied themselves for the impending confrontation. They knew that the road ahead would be fraught with danger, but they were no longer the fearful conscripts they once were. They were a united force, their emblems shining in the darkness of space. With their mission clear and armed with their new weapons, the Space Lords, led by Rook and flanked by Nakia and Lysander, advanced in a Spartan formation towards the decontamination area. Their steps were measured, each move calculated with the confidence of warriors ready for a confrontation as they entered the area. General Kragar stood before them, his expression one of shock and disbelief at the sight of the Space Lords, now clad in armor unlike any he had seen before, and brandishing weapons unknown to him, visibly unsettled him. Raising his arm in a commanding gesture, Kragar attempted to exert his control over them, likely seeking to deactivate their implants or trigger some fatal protocol. But to his astonishment, nothing happened. The Space Lords remained unaffected, a clear indication that they were no longer under his control. Rook, stepping forward, addressed the general with a steely resolve. "We're taking control of this ship, Kragar. Unlike the millions of others you've oppressed, we're giving you a choice. Surrender or die." General Kragar, seething with rage at this defiance, turned back to the holographic display in front of him. His fingers danced over the controls, attempting once again to activate the Space Lords' implants to rip them from their bodies. But then, a deep, resonant sound, akin to a bass drum being struck with force, echoed through the chamber. All eyes turned towards Lysander, who stood with a big, self-satisfied smile on his face. "What?" His answer was no, Lysander said with a shrug, his casual demeanor belying the gravity of the situation. It was clear that he had initiated an attack on General Kroghar, a preemptive strike to assert their newfound power. The other Space Lords, understanding the necessity of Lysander's abrupt action, watched intently as the outcome unfolded. Lysander's weapon, the Quantum Disruptor, a marvel of Siren technology, unleashed its power upon General Kroghar. The weapon, designed to disrupt matter at a quantum level, enveloped the general in a shimmering field of energy. Kroghar's figure distorted and shimmered as if reality around him was bending and twisting. In moments, the once formidable Drakzarian commander was no more, his form dissolving into the air, leaving nothing but a trace of his existence. In the aftermath of this decisive strike, the ship's lighting system suddenly shifted, bathing the entire vessel in ultraviolet flashes. This spectrum of light, invisible to normal human eyes, was now perceivable by everyone on board due to the Drakzarian implant enhancements. For the conscripts, this was an unprecedented phenomenon, having never encountered such a threat aboard their own ship, not knowing that the threat was not toward them but from one of their own against their captors. The Drakzarians, however, reacted differently. The ultraviolet flashes triggered a violent physiological response in their bodies. They began to shake uncontrollably, their fight responses, dormant for thousands of years, now violently awakened. The sight of one of their leaders being annihilated by a weapon that should not exist on the ship threw them into disarray. Drakzarian soldiers, usually so disciplined and unyielding, scrambled around in confusion and panic. Their command structure had been shattered with the loss of General Kroghar, and the unexpected visual and physical assault left them struggling to comprehend and respond to the situation. Space Lords, seizing this moment of chaos, prepared to take control of the ship. Rook, rallying his companions, shouted, "Now's our chance! While they're disoriented, we take over the ship! Move out!" The Space Lords advanced through the corridors, their movements precise and coordinated. Their new enhancements in weaponry gave them an edge over the disoriented Drakzarians, who were still reeling from the loss of their commander and the strange ultraviolet flashes. Moving from one section of the ship to another, the Space Lords encountered pockets of resistance. However, the Drakzarians' usual tactical prowess was hampered by their disorientation, allowing the Space Lords to gain ground rapidly. Nakia, alongside Rook, felt a sense of exhilaration mixed with a grave sense of responsibility. "We're rewriting the rules of this war," she said, her eyes focused on the path ahead. The ship, once a symbol of their oppression, was now the scene of their uprising. The Space Lords, empowered and united, were on the brink of taking control, a significant step towards their ultimate goal of freedom from the Drakzarians. As they neared the ship's command center, the reality of their situation set in. They were not just fighting for their own liberation. They were fighting for all those who had been subjugated and oppressed across the galaxy. The Space Lords, now a force of liberation, moved with purpose and precision through the ship. They had resolved to be merciful, to extend compassion even to those who had once held them captive. However, in the heat of the confrontation, mercy was often a luxury they couldn't afford. Except for those in technical and laboratory areas, most Drakzarians they encountered were quickly and efficiently neutralized. Their movements were a blend of tactical advance and necessary aggression, a path carved with the intent of seizing control. As they progressed through the ship, the Space Lords' approach was methodical. Each corridor and compartment was cleared with a combination of strategic positioning and the overwhelming force of their new weapons. The Drakzarians, still reeling from the loss of General Kroghar and the chaos that followed, were unable to mount an effective resistance. Eventually, the Space Lords reached the common area where many of their fellow conscripts were gathered. The conscripts looked up in shock and awe as their comrades in arms burst into the room, brandishing weapons capable of defeating the Drakzarians. The arrival of the Space Lords was met with shock. The moment was interrupted as several Drakzarians dropped from the ceiling, attempting a surprise assault. But the Space Lords were ready. Their weapons blazed, efficiently taking down the attackers before they could reach the conscripts below. The display of power and protection was met with cheers and shouts of relief from the conscripts. Rook, standing at the forefront, raised his hand to command silence. "Stay here," he ordered the gathered conscripts. "This area is secure for now. We're going to take control of the ship. Once we have the command center, we can end this." His words were met with nods of understanding and murmurs of support. The conscripts, seeing their fellow soldiers transformed into empowered warriors, felt a surge of hope. The tide was turning in their favor, and the Space Lords were leading the charge. From the crew room of similarly dressed conscripts, Rook spotted Stacy rushing towards him. Reacting quickly, he retracted his helmet, revealing his face. Stacy, overwhelmed with emotion, leaped into his arms, wrapping her arms around his neck in a tight embrace. She planted a passionate kiss on his lips, her actions speaking volumes of her admiration and relief at seeing him alive and leading the charge. "Your actions, they're incredible, Rook," she said breathlessly, her eyes shining with pride and affection. Rook, feeling the weight of the moment, returned her kiss, a brief but intense affirmation of their bond throughout their conscription. He gently set her down and turned his attention to the ship's communication network, accessible from the common area. With a sense of urgency, he broadcast a message to the entire ship. "To all Drakzarian forces aboard, surrender now. If you pose no threat, you will live. Show the slightest sign of hostility, and you will be destroyed," Rook declared, his voice resolute and authoritative. His ultimatum, however, was met with a sinister response. Across the ship, conscripts began to scream in agony as their implants were forcibly activated, ripping from their bodies in a gruesome display of Drakzarian desperation. It was a brutal and devastating tactic, one that turned the ship into a scene of horror and despair. The Drakzarians, rather than surrendering, had chosen a path of destruction. They began inputting self-destruct commands into the conscripts' implants, killing them one by one. It was a clear message. They would rather see the conscripts dead than allow them to be free. The Space Lords, witnessing this atrocity, were filled with rage. The scene around them was chaotic, with conscripts collapsing, their bodies racked by the violent removal of their implants. In that heart-wrenching moment, as Stacy looked into Rook's eyes, there was a deep understanding that transcended words. She knew the gravity of the situation and the necessity of Rook's mission. "Go," she urged him, her voice laced with a mixture of fear and resolve. "Save as many as you can. We were all doomed the moment we were conscripted. Defeat them, Rook. Ilo." Her declaration was cut short in a grotesque and tragic manner. Before Rook's eyes, Stacy's implants were violently ripped from her body, leaving behind a horrific scene. In that instant, the love and warmth that had filled Rook's heart were replaced with an all-consuming rage. Fueled by his anger and the sudden reintroduction of the chemicals the Drakzarians had been siphoning from their bodies, Rook felt a surge of amplified abilities coursing through him. It was as if the very essence of their oppression was now empowering them to fight back with greater ferocity. Rook turned to the other Space Lords. "Channel your rage! Use it!" he commanded, his voice a mix of grief and fury. "We move now! We end this!" With a newfound intensity, the Space Lords charged through the ship. Their movement was a blur of efficiency and vengeance, each Drakzarian they encountered meeting a swift end. Those who posed a threat were eliminated without hesitation, their reign of terror coming to an abrupt close at the hands of the very beings they had sought to control. As they advanced, the Space Lords noticed that the Drakzarians who were technicians and mechanics, unarmed and unprepared for combat, quickly surrendered. They curled up within their own wings, a clear sign of submission, making it easier for the Space Lords to distinguish between combatants and non-combatants. This distinction was crucial. It allowed the Space Lords to focus their efforts on neutralizing the threat while minimizing unnecessary casualties. Even in their rage and grief, they maintained a semblance of order and purpose. The ship, once a bastion of Drakzarian power, was now a battleground where the oppressed rose against their oppressors. The Space Lords, driven by the loss of their comrades and the desire for freedom, fought with them ruthlessly. As they neared the ship's control center, the final stronghold of the Drakzarian forces, The Space Lords prepared for what might be their final confrontation. The loss of Stacy and so many others weighed heavily on them, but it also strengthened their resolve. Rook, leading the charge, knew that the battle was about more than just their survival. It was a fight for justice, for the countless lives lost to the Drakzarians' tyranny. As they breached the control center, the Space Lords were ready to face whatever awaited them, united in their grief, their rage, and their unbreakable spirit. The battle for the control room was nothing short of cataclysmic. As the Space Lords burst in, they were met with a barrage of fire from the Drakzarian guards, the last line of defense for the ship's command center. But the Space Lords, fueled by their amplified abilities and the rage burning within them, were an unstoppable force. Rook led the charge, his quantum disruptor blazing with deadly precision. Each shot he fired disrupted the very fabric of his targets, leaving nothing but a void where Drakzarian soldiers once stood. The other Space Lords, equally formidable, unleashed a relentless onslaught, their weapons cutting through the enemy ranks with ease. Drakzarians, despite their advanced technology, were no match for the fury and power of the Space Lords. The ranks quickly diminished under the relentless assault. The control room, once a hub of Drakzarian authority, was rapidly turning into the site of their defeat. Within the chaos, Nakia and Lysander moved in tandem, covering each other's backs as they advanced through the room. Their movements were a deadly dance, a symphony of destruction that left no Drakzarian standing. Within minutes, the control room was secured. The Space Lords, breathing heavily from the exertion of battle, surveyed the room. The control panels and screens once used to command the ship and control the conscripts were now at their disposal. Rook approached the main console, his hands moving over the controls. With a few swift inputs, he seized control of the ship's systems, wresting it away from Drakzarian command. A sense of triumph filled the room as the realization set in. They had taken control of the ship. The Space Lords quickly regrouped, preparing for their next move. Their victory in the control room was significant, but their mission was far from over. Their next target was Zahak's throne room, the heart of Drakzarian power on the ship. As they made their way towards the throne room, the corridors of the ship were eerily silent. The battle had taken its toll, and the remaining Drakzarian forces seemed to have retreated or surrendered. The Space Lords moved with purpose, each step bringing them closer to confronting Zahak, the architect of their suffering. The throne room doors loomed ahead, imposing and foreboding. Rook, Nakia, Lysander, and the rest of the Space Lords paused for a moment, gathering their resolve. Behind those doors was the being who had controlled their fate for so long. This was more than just a confrontation. It was a reckoning. With a collective nod, they readied their weapons and pushed the doors open. As the doors to the throne room swung open, the Space Lords were met with an unexpected scene. Standing in front of a swirling portal, Zahak, the Drakzarian overlord, was preparing for his escape. Still chained to his waist was the sad-looking girl, an innocent caught in the midst of this cosmic struggle. She stood between Zahak and the Space Lords, a human shield for his cowardly retreat. Rook stepped forward, his voice filled with anger. "Zahak, your time has come to pay for Jackson Stacy and all the others you preyed upon," he called out, his words echoing in the vast chamber. Zahak, his face twisted into a sneer, turned to face the Space Lords. "You think you have won? You are mere pawns in a game far greater than you can comprehend," he retorted with disdain. The Space Lords held their weapons at the ready, but the presence of the girl held their fire. Zahak, noticing their hesitation, gave a cold laugh. "You see, even now, you are constrained by your morals, your emotions. It is why you will never truly be free." Nakia, stepping beside Rook, replied fiercely, "We are free, Zahak. Free from your control, from your manipulations. We are the Space Lords, and we will not let you continue your reign of terror." Zahak's eyes flickered with a momentary uncertainty, but he quickly masked it with his usual arrogance. "Your rebellion is futile. The Drakzarians will always prevail." With those final words, he stepped back into the portal, pulling the girl with him. In a flash of light, they disappeared, leaving the Space Lord staring at the empty space where Zahak once stood. The room fell into a stunned silence. Zahak's escape was a blow, but it was not the end of their fight. Rook clenched his fists. We may not know where he went, but this is far from over. We will find him, and we will end this, he vowed.